it's summertime right now, and I recently rendered or made an image of an ice cream. And that's my final result. This is like the image that I rendered. I've got, the ice cream, the swirl, the cone, everything. We're gonna, with the textures and stuff. And it's on a nice blurred background. So, yeah, that was like my final image. And I decided to now make a tutorial about it. And so, yeah, that's what I want to do today. And we're going to cover a lot of topics in this tutorial. It's going to be sort of basic, but basically we're going to model the swirl, or the ice cream swirl. We're going to model the cone. Then we're going to model the sprinkles. We're going to put the sprinkles on the swirl. And then we're going to do the lights, the cameras. Obviously, we have to make the materials for all of these objects to make it like, nice and bumpy. And after that, we're just going to press F12 and we're going to render. So yeah, that's my plan of action for today. I'm sorry if I'm going to sound a little bit tired, especially towards, because this is probably going to be a long tutorial, and I'm probably going to split it up into 2 parts. So if I sound tired, I'm really sorry, but I've done this for like 5 times now, and I'm just trying to get it perfect. And again, this is my first tutorial, so I'm sorry if the quality isn't like the best. But yeah, that's what we're shooting for, and yeah, so let's get started. We have our Blender here, and we're going to launch Blender, and this is what we're going to be greeted with. We have the camera, the default cube, and the lamp. And let me just turn on one thing for you guys to see. I'm going to turn on my screencast keys, and I will move them all the way over here a little bit more, like that. And I will make the size bigger, like 30 and 50. I'm sorry that I didn't do this before. Never mind. So, yeah. That's my screencast key, so now you guys can see whatever I'm pressing. If I press N, I'll open up this panel. If I press T, I close the toolbox. So yeah, you guys will basically see whatever I'm doing. So yeah, we've got the default cube in the middle, we've got the lamp, and the camera. First things first, I do not like this light. I'm going to delete it. It's, a default point lamp, doesn't give a lot of light. It's not really ideal. So we're going to be rendering this image in cycles. And basically what that means is Blender has 3 render engines. We've got Blender Render, we've got Blender Game, and Cycles Render. And the difference between the 3 is that Blender Game is predominantly used for, you guessed it, games. It's used for rendering games, physics, logic, a lot of stuff like that. Blender Render is the original Blender render engine for in Blender, and a lot of Blender and render, and it's the older one. Cycles is the newer one, and the problem with it is it's not really realistic, because when we like turn on a lamp in the real world, in reality, if we turn a lamp on, the rays that are cast, the light, it's cast, and it bounces off all the surfaces and objects in our room, and basically the whole room becomes illuminated one way or another. In Blender Render, unfortunately, that doesn't happen. It only bounces like once or twice. It doesn't bounce a lot. Meanwhile, in Cycles Render, which we'll switch to now by going into this tab and pressing Cycles Render, in Cycles, well, there is no noticeable change, but you'll see that later. In Cycles Render, though, the light bounces a lot, and it basically gives us a lot more realism in our renders, and it helps us achieve a lot more realistic results. So yeah, we're gonna start, and the first thing I'm gonna do is, yeah, unfortunately, I have to delete this cube right there, because we're not gonna start with a cube. So basically, all we have left is this lonely sad camera, and I wanted to right. So we're going to be making a vanilla ice cream. Even though you guys can make chocolate, I've checked with chocolate, the materials I've checked, and it works perfectly. Like, it looks good. Although you guys may think it looks like something else, sort of, kind of, the swirl and everything. It suggests something else. But anyway, and you guys can make whatever flavor you want, basically. If you really like strawberry, you can make that too. But I'm doing vanilla because vanilla is obviously awesome, and yeah, it beats everything else. I'm kidding. So, the first thing we have to do is, it's very good practice when we're doing something and we don't know exactly how it looks, or even if we do know how it looks, but like we want to, get a more realistic result, we're going to add a reference photo. It's really good to look at something like that's already there when you're modeling or, animating, whatever. So we are going to load in a reference photo, and we're gonna click on this little button, and this is like our central, sort of like our hub for different things. We can this is our 3D view, as you guys can see, 3D view. We can switch to the timeline. We can switch to the graph editor, the logic editor if you want to do games, the node editor, which we'll be using later in this tutorial, or we can switch to the UV image editor, which we'll be using right now, to add a little photo. And we're going to be adding this photo, ice cream cone. You don't have to do it. I'm just going to do it so it's easier for everyone. And I'm just going to, make it a bit smaller, the window, so it gives us more room to, practice with. There we go. So I'm basically mostly going to be using this for the cone. For the shape of the cone, I don't really want to model this because this looks awful, boring and bland, and I don't even know who would eat an ice cream like that. We want to go for the swirl, the authentic, like beautiful, nice, fun swirl. So, if you left click anywhere in the 3D view, you guys see that this 3D cursor, this little gizmo thingamajig, is following us, and it's like, what is it doing? So basically, it's called our 3D cursor, and what it does is, well, one of the things it does is wherever if we press Shift A to add something, it'll add it exactly where the 3D cursor is. So in this case, I added a plane, and it added it exactly where that 3D cursor is. So I'm going to press Shift C to recenter it, reposition it in the center, and I'm going to now press Shift A to add a sphere. And bear with me, I know this is a lot of talking, but there are two spheres in Blender. There's the UV sphere and the isosphere. The UV sphere is the, basically, if we go into edit mode on each sphere by pressing tab, we go into edit mode on the first sphere, the UV sphere. It consists of mostly quads or squares, quads as they call them in 3D. And it's like, the Earth, we've got latitude and longitude, and at the poles we have triangles. Right. So yeah, we've got triangular faces, or tris as they're also called in 3D. So yeah, that's the UV sphere, and then the isosphere consists all of tris. So the whole thing consists of tris. We're going to be using the UV sphere. So we're going to press Shift S and move the selection to the cursor, because the cursor is in the center, and we're going to press Shift S to move the selection to the center. There we go. So we've got a beautiful little sphere, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to rename this to ice cream. And the way I did that is I went to the Object tab in the Properties. I went to, let me just expand that a little. I went to the Object tab right there, and that little yellow square, and that's where I can rename my object. So yeah, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to shade this sphere smoothly. That's one thing. The second thing I want to do is you can still see kind of these jaggedy edges, like it's not really that smooth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier. And let me just quickly, the last example I'm going to give before we actually start, modeling, is the subdivision surface modifier. Basically, let's say we added a cube, and I'm going to go into face mode by pressing Control Tab and go into face mode. And, any mesh in Blender or anywhere, and you guys should have learned this from geometry, it consists of vertices, edges, and faces. So yeah, we're going to go into face mode, we're going to select this face, and we're going to go W to open up the Specials menu and press Subdivide. It's going to subdivide our mesh. Then we can increase the number of cuts till 10, and you guys can see that it subdivided our mesh 10 times. Now, that's one way of subdividing. Another way is if we can select the whole thing and press Subdivide Smoothly. And as you guys can see, it uses a special algorithm to subdivide it another way, or the smooth way. And if we then continue doing it, if we increase the number of cuts, it'll slowly start forming into a sphere, sort of. But then there is another way of doing it. If we add another cube, and I'll just show you, we can add a modifier called the subdivision surface modifier. And the reason, well, one of the advantages of a modifier, any modifier, is that it's not permanent. I can just X and it'll revert back to the original mesh. But unless you press apply. If you press apply, then it'll stick. That mesh will be like, that's it. So yeah, if we increase the number of subdivisions, the levels, as you guys can see, at 6, it's already looking exactly like that sphere. So, I mean, yeah, that's what the subdivision surface modifier does. And I mean, you can do a simple subdivision, or you can do a Catmull-Clark, which is the special algorithm it uses to do it smoothly. So, all right, now that that's out of the way, we're going to subdivide it. And we're going to use one level. You don't need more than that because it is a sphere. So yeah, one level of subdivision, and let's get started. We're going to go into front view by pressing numpad 1. And yeah, let's start. Numpad 1, front view, press tab to go into edit mode. And we're going to go press control tab and go into vertex mode and if we alt right click, we can select the whole edge loop, not only the vertices or the edges. We're going to select the whole edge loop if we alt right click. So we're going to select each third edge loop, just like that, just what I'm doing, around the whole sphere. So we're going to go around the whole sphere, and we're going to select the whole, every third edge loop, I'm sorry. So there we go. It's basically selected. As you guys can see, there is a problem here. Like, this isn't, it's like going the second, but it doesn't matter. And now we're going to scale it in, but we don't need to scale it on all 3 axes. We only need to scale it on the X, which is the red one, and the Y, which is the green one. And the blue one is Z. So we're going to press S and then Shift Z, which will constrain it to the X and the Y, and it won't do the Z. And now we scale it in, and I think that is about good. And there we go. We're getting sort of, but it doesn't look like a swirl yet. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the modifiers. We're going to add one more modifier. I promise this is the last one, I'm pretty sure, at least on this object. And it's going to be a simple deform modifier. And, you know, the simple deform modifier, it has twist, bend, taper, stretch. We're going to use twist. And we just have to increase the angle to what we see fit. And I found that 254 is a good angle for us. So yeah, that's going to be our angle, 254. And yeah, then we go back into edit mode. And what we're going to do now is we're going to select the top vertex and just move it up. There we go. And now we're going to select this edge loop right there by pressing alt right click. And we're going to move it up too. And with this vertex, I kind of want to move it a little, you know, I just want to position it like a little more interesting. So like, you know, the swirl kind of, I don't know. I don't even know how to say that. But anyway, there we go. We're doing it. We're doing it. And yeah, that's starting to look sort of like a swirl. And then if we press A a couple of times and select the whole thing, we can scale it in the Z-axis by pressing SZ. That'll scale it in the Z-axis, and it's already starting to look more and more like a swirl. So the other thing we have to do is we're going to scale this one up, this edge loop up. Again, alt-right click and scale it up. And that's starting to look pretty good. Maybe a little more. And there we go. So one more thing that I wanted to, the last thing pretty much that we have to do with this swirl is ice cream swirls, the top, sort of like goes in layers. Like imagine, you know those wedding cakes that have a lot of tears on them, and then at the top you see the girl and you know, the bride and the groom, and they're kissing sort of, or whatever they're doing. So yeah, those kind of cakes, and that's what we're going to try to mimic, I guess. We're going to, well, I mean, ice cream does it the same way. When the ice cream man, you know, makes the ice cream, he does it in layers, sort of. So we're going to select this edge loop, sorry, not that one, this one, and we're going to scale it in. Just about there. And then we're going to deselect it, and we're going to do a box select by pressing B, and I'm doing this in wireframe mode to select everything that's in the back. And, yeah, and we're going to move it up. G, Z. There we go. And we can also scale it a bit up and a bit down. There we go. And now we're going to select the top, everything on top of that edge loop, and scale it down, and move it down, sorry. And there we go. And now we have to do that with another edge loop. We're just going to scale it in. We're going to take everything on top of it, move it down, And we're going to take everything on the bottom, move it up. And now it's looking pretty good. And one more thing, maybe just a little less, because it seems to be a bit drastic. And that's looking good. Maybe we can scale this up a little, SZ. And I think that's good. I think we're done with the swirl. Amazing, right? So yeah, now we're going to move on to the little harder part of it, and we're going to make the cone. Now this is basically where we'll need the reference. And we're going to move it first. We're going to Shift A, add a cube. We're going to move it down in the Z-axis so it's not overlapping with the swirl, so we can actually see what we're doing. And we're going to go tab into edit mode, and let's begin. Oh, before we do that, we just have to add a subdivision surface modifier, our best friend, and we're going to increase the number of subdivisions to 3. In the view, in our 3D view, it's going to be 3, and when we render it, it's also going to be 3. And, of course, we need to do smooth shading. There we go. And now let's begin. First things first, this is a very sharp edge on top, just like a lot of them are, as you guys can see. So the way to achieve sharpness is, I mean, if it's subdivided smoothly, how would you achieve sharpness? So we can press Shift-E to crease the edges, and you see it starts becoming pink, and now it's like creased. And you guys can see that's one way of doing it. But what I like to do is, let's just remove it. What I like to do, and this is like, I guess, the better way of doing it because it's a lot more customizable, you guys can control how much sharpness you want. We'll add another edge loop by pressing Control-R. And Control-R adds another edge loop. And you guys can see when we press Control-R, you get this like pink circle around your object. And that's, if you press, it'll add the edge loop. And then we'll slide it all the way up, and there we go. And that's it. It's as sharp as it was if it was creased. But we can control it. If we slide it down, we can control exactly how sharp we want it to be. So I want it to be fully, like the full sharpness. And now we have this little inset, sort of. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another one at the height that we think it is. We're going to scale it in. We're going to add another one over here to make it sharp. And another one on the other side to make it sharp, I guess, from the other side. We're going to add another one in the middle because right now it's sort of straight. But here it comes out and it's kind of spherical. So we're going to scale that up. There we go. And we're getting that nice circly kind of look. So after that, we have this shape that we have to tackle. So let's do that next. We're going to select the whole thing again. I'm selecting the whole face because you can't see when the vertices are in the same position, which they are in this case. These two vertices, they're exactly in the same, like, I mean, from here, they look like as if they're one. But if I'm not in wireframe, I'm selecting only one. That's why I go into wireframe to select all 4. And you guys can work without wireframe. You guys can press this little button, which will not limit the selection to visible. And now you can see what's behind, and you can select everything behind the object. But it gets kind of uncomfortable and kind of hard to see when, like, you have a lot of faces. So we're not going to do that, and we're going to work with wireframe mode. We're going to press Z, box select the whole thing, and we're going to move it up, scale it in. And scale it in to about there. I think that's good. And then we're going to make it sharp by adding another edge loop, Control-R, and we're going to add another one, but this one we're going to scale up to about there, maybe a little more. And now we're going to scale it down. And let's press A, grab those two down there, scale them in a little. That's starting to look pretty good. And maybe what we can do is we can actually scale these out like that, maybe. All right, that looks good. And now let's move on to this part right here. It's basically the same thing as here. We just have to do the same thing. We're going to take the bottommost face, and I'm just going to go into face mode quickly, select the face, and then come out of it. Go back to front view, and we're going to extrude it. By pressing E, we're going to extrude it, and we're immediately going to scale it up to about there. That seems good to me. Even more a little. Maybe, yeah, that's good. That's good. So we're going to scale it up, and Right, so now we have to add another edge right in the middle. Oh, I'm sorry. Control R right in the middle and scale it in because this has to be a convex shape. And if you, by the way, if you want to move it, because like right now it's a bit low, you press G once and you can move it. And if you press G the second time, you can slide it. Slide it along your mesh. So yeah, that's what I'll do. I press G twice and I'll slide it. And now we got that nice concave curve. Or yeah, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to add one more edge loop to make it sharp, just like that. And actually, we'll move this one down a bit. Scale it in. There we go. Now we're getting that look. And maybe we can just move the whole thing up a bit. Just like that. Maybe a little more. Just like that. There we go. So, we've got the whole thing, all of the shapes, and now what we need to do is it comes in very quickly and then it goes out. So what we'll do is we'll sort of create a face in this face. So what we'll do is we'll press I to inset the face, and for me it's actually this face is selected, but for you guys it'll probably be like this. So what you'll do is you'll press F6 and deselect select outer or uncheck it, and then it'll select the interface, which is that one. So yeah, that's what we want to do. And then we're gonna select this face in the center. We're gonna extrude it, and that's it. That's pretty much our cone right there. If you guys got this far, I'm really happy. Thank you for like listening to me this far. You know, gosh, wait one sec. We're gonna select that and maybe move it down even more. There we go, and now you guys can see that this is what I mean by smooth. So if we add an edge loop, if it's going to let us add an edge loop right here, we can then put it up like that, and now it's not smooth anymore. And there we go. That's pretty much our whole model right there for the ice cream cone. Maybe what we can do is we can make it a little less sharp, which I think it was just a bit too sharp over there. So yeah, we'll do something like this. I think it's going to be a lot less sharp and a little bit better. But anyway, most cones that I know at least aren't solid. They're hollow. So that's what we'll do. I mean, yeah, you guys can leave the cone solid if most cones that you eat are solid. But we're going to make a hollow cone. And as you guys can see, I pressed I to inset, and now it selected the interface. So then we're going to extrude that face in the center. We're going to just extrude it down and scale it in. And one thing that I'm sorry, I exited that edit mode. I think we should scale it out. And now we'll add an edge loop if it's going to let us again. Yeah, we're going to add an edge loop in between those two to make a sharp line, as you guys can see. We're going to select both of them. If, again, they let me select both of them. There we go. And there we go. That's a nice cone. And that's pretty much it. Now, it might look like the torch that the Lady Liberty or Statue of Liberty has. Yeah, that might be what it looks like right now, but I don't think it'll look like that later. So, right, we're going to make the cone and maybe make it a little bigger. There we go. We're going to position our cone in the ice cream, or the ice cream in the cone, and maybe actually scale the ice cream out and push it down. There we go. That looks fantastic, and I like how the ice cream is huge compared to the cone. It actually looks pretty good. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We modeled the cone, which one thing that we forgot to do with it is go back into the Object tab and rename it to Cone. So yeah, we modeled the cone, we modeled the ice cream, and all that's left now is to model the sprinkles, and we'll be done with modeling. So we go into any layer you want, any other layer, which the layers are down here. I'm going to go to layer 5, I think, whatever. I mean, you guys can go to the last layer, any layer you want. I just like to go to, like, whatever, layer 5. That's going to be the layer I go to. And I'm going to add a cylinder. Mesh, Shift-A, Mesh, Cylinder. And we're going to shade it smoothly, and then we're going to duplicate it 5 times. Or, you know, for good measure, There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we're going to select them all, as I just did, or we can just do a quick box select. And we're going to press S, Z, to lock it in the Z-axis and just scale it up. That's it. And now they're like sort of looking like sprinkles in quotes, because they're really not. We're going to add color to them. Very important, right? Sprinkles. I'm going to do rainbow sprinkles. You guys can do chocolate, whatever you want. I like rainbow, again, because rainbow is amazing. So yeah, I selected one of the sprinkles. I went into the material tab, which is up here. You guys can look what they're all called. Object, particles, if it's going to show it. Particles, right? Particles, we're going to be using it later. Yeah, we're going to go into the material tab. And this is the cycles materials. We're going to add a diffuse material, which is, we're not going to go for a glossy. We don't need it to look like metal or reflect anything. We don't want it to be glass or transparent, for that matter. We want it to be a nice, just solid color, diffuse. And we're going to change the color to red. And I'll do it this way because I want it to be like perfect red, so R1. You guys can change it like that, with the color wheel. I'm just going to do it like that. So yeah, we've got red, and it's not showing up in the 3D view. When we render it, it will show up as red. But for now, it's not showing up as red in the 3D view. And why is that? If we go down here and expand settings, and then press Control-C to copy the color, and then press Control-V to paste it in the viewport color, that's it. Now in the viewport, or in our 3D view, it appears as red. So now we go to another sprinkle and rename it to, color it, let's make this one green. Then we're going to change the color to green, and then we're going to take this sprinkle and make it blue, 100%. Oh, yeah, that is. Paste it, and then we're going to do this one. This one's going to be yellow. There we go. Very funny. This one's going to be magenta, I think. Yeah. This one's going to be magenta. There we go. And the last one is going to be a nice, like, baby blue teal kind of one, which, again, can be achieved easily like that. And there we go. We've got our 6 sprinkles. They're all rainbow, the way I like them. That's it. So the last thing that we have to do with the sprinkles is rename them. Sprinkle 1. Sprinkle. And last but not least, let's not forget sprinkle 6. And again, it's a really good practice to, first of all, get references, and second of all, always name your objects, because, I mean, when you have a lot of objects, you start like actually forgetting which object is which if they're all named like cube and sphere. It's really hard to tell. So the last thing we have to do with these sprinkles is select them all and press Control-G to add them to a new group. And as you guys see, it says Create New Group right there, and we're going to press F6 to open up our operator recent, like the thing that we did just then. And we're going to name it Sprinkles. Yeah, there we go. And that's it. So yeah, we've got it all set up. Everything's good. We've got our 6 sprinkles. We've got our cone. And now if we go back to the cone with the ice cream, and I have to say this does look a bit ridiculous, but okay, that's starting to look a bit better, because yeah, it was looking really weird. Just a bit, unproportional. But yeah, we're going to go select our ice cream, and we're going to go all the way here. And as I said, this is the particles tab. We're going to click on particles. And why I want to do this with particles is I want to add a lot of something. When you want to add a lot of something, like let's say you want to add smoke or fire, or you want to add a lot of ashes or debris, maybe gnats or fireflies, whatever you want. If there's a lot of it, even hair, because there's like thousands and thousands of hairs on your scalp or whatever. There's tens of thousands. You use a particle system. So for the sprinkles, we're going to use a particle system. So we're going to press this plus button to add a new particle system. We're going to call it sprinkles. And we're going to change it to hair, not emitter, hair. And yeah, we've got a nice hairy cone. I know it looks pretty crazy. And of course, the first thing we have to do is change the hair length to 0.8 because it's a bit too hairy. I think we're even gonna have to go lower than that. I mean, yeah, I think we're done here. We're gonna leave this this ice cream with an afro, and I'll see you later. I'm kidding. It's not gonna be that easy. We're gonna change the number to 1,200, and we're gonna, when it's rendered, if we go to the render tab, you see when it renders, it's gonna appear as a path, and we don't want that. We want it to appear as a group, and specifically the sprinkles group. And there we go. We've got our glorious sprinkles all over our ice cream. It looks awful, absolutely horrible, because the sprinkles are nice and fat. But yeah, that's not what we want. We want to, first of all, increase the random size all the way to 1, so they're all, random, more or less. And of course, we have to, like, do the hair length. I found that 0.5 works pretty good, pretty well. So yeah, 0.5, maybe even 0.45. Yeah, that's good. I think I'll leave it as that. So yeah, the last thing I wanted to show you guys is how can we control the density of our sprinkles, like where they appear and where they don't. Like, usually they don't appear on top of the cone, the sprinkles. So the way we do that is, one thing I want to do is, I feel it's just a bit too stretched. So what we'll do is we're gonna make it a little less stretched and all crazy. There we go. So now it's, I think it's toned down a little less stretched over here. Basically, yeah, they don't have a lot of sprinkles up here at the tip of the ice cream swirl. At least I don't think so. Even though I've eaten countless ice creams and I still don't know. It's kind of embarrassing. But anyway, what we have to do is we have to control the density of our ice creams with a vertex group. You see? Density. But right now, if we click vertex groups, there are none. So what we do is we press Control-Tab on our, when we have the swirl selected, we press Control-Tab to go into weight paint mode. And if you guys look, there is object mode down here, edit mode. They have sculpt mode, every type of mode, and including weight paint mode. And what we're going to do is so 0 means there is no weight, which means no sprinkles will appear. And when it's blue, that means there are no sprinkles. But it hasn't created the group yet, so it doesn't matter. And our sprinkles currently aren't being controlled by the density. But 1 is where they are going to appear, 1, with a weight of 1. So where it's going to be red, that's where they're going to appear. So I'm going to make the radius of my brush a bit bigger, a lot bigger actually, because I want this to be fast. I'm just going to go like that. And then I'm going to go to the back, do the same exact thing. And there we go. Those that's what I'm going to leave it as. It's red, and where it's red, the sprinkles will appear, and where it's blue, they won't appear. So at the tip, there will be no sprinkles, unfortunately. If we press Control-Tab again, and then we go to the density, you see a group appeared. And if we click that immediately, you guys can see what happens. There are no sprinkles up on top. And that's it. So now we've got the sprinkles, we've got the cone, we've got the ice cream. It's almost good. And this is pretty much the end of my first part of the tutorial. I'm actually very... Oh, that's why. This is the end of the first part, and the second part we're going to be covering cameras, materials, and lights. That's it.